My name is Knox and I am 46 years old. If you had asked me if I ever thought I would one day experience such betrayal when I first got married 18 years ago, I would have scoffed. But life is like that. It always hits you in the head when you least expect it. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday night. I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner, listening to the sound of Emma practicing her violin in the living room. Juliet hadn't come home yet, probably working late at the office again, and Noah was curled up on the couch, engrossed in his handheld game console. It was supposed to be a peaceful and cozy night, just like the past countless nights. "Daddy, when is Mommy coming back?" Noah asked, looking up. I looked at my watch and sighed. "It should be soon, kids. You know Mommy's been busy lately." I tried to sound relaxed. Emma stopped her bow and looked at me thoughtfully. She was always sensitive, and I think she must have sensed something. In her 15-year-old eyes, I seemed to see a hint of apprehension that shouldn't belong to that age. Just then I heard the sound of a key turning. Juliet pushed the door open with a tired smile on her face. "Sorry I'm late," she said, taking off her heels as she did so. I walked over and gently kissed her cheek. "It's okay. Dinner will be ready soon," I said, but inside I felt like something wasn't quite right. Juliet's eyes drifted and seemed to be deliberately avoiding my gaze. At the dinner table, Juliet gushes about the company's new projects with a twinkle of excitement in her eye. "Max is such a genius," she said, "and his ideas are always a hit with clients." Max Thompson, Juliet's new boss. That name had been popping up a little too often lately. I chewed my food in silence, an indescribable uneasiness in my heart. "Can we go to a concert this weekend?" Emma asked suddenly, interrupting Juliet's gushing. Juliet froze for a moment, then said, somewhat distractedly, "Sure thing, babe. Remind me when it's time." I look at the side of Juliet's face and suddenly realize how little she's been involved in family activities lately. Always working late, always talking about that damn Max. Noah interjected excitedly, "There's a tech fair at school next week and I made a super cool robot." "That's great, son." I rubbed his hair. "We'll definitely go see it." I glanced at Juliet, only to find her attention back on her phone. After dinner, I stood at the sink washing dishes and looked through the window at the swing set in the backyard. It was installed for the kids when we first moved in. I remember Juliet excitedly planning how she was going to decorate the backyard, and we were painting a beautiful blueprint of the future together. Thinking about it now, those images seem like a lifetime ago. Juliet walked into the kitchen and pulled a bottle of water out of the refrigerator. "Knox," she hesitated, "there's an important dinner at the office next Friday and I might be late." I nodded, trying to suppress the loss in my heart. "Okay, no problem. Do you need me to do anything?" She shook her head and hurriedly left the kitchen. I looked at her back and suddenly felt a pang of strangeness. Was this really my wife of 18 years? What had gone wrong between us? That night, I lay in bed, listening to Juliet's even breathing, but I couldn't sleep. I began to think back over our married life, trying to figure out the root of the problem. Maybe it was work stress? Maybe it was a midlife crisis? Or was it? I didn't dare to keep thinking about it. I rolled over and looked at Juliet's sleeping face. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a faint glow on her face. She was so beautiful, so familiar, yet so far away. I reached out and gently stroked her cheek as she frowned slightly in her sleep. "Juliet," I call out softly, "do you still love me?" There was no answer, just the silence of the night. I closed my eyes and tried to convince myself that everything would be fine. But a voice in the back of my mind kept warning me that a storm was coming, and I was afraid that our little marriage boat wouldn't be able to withstand this test. That Friday, the night Juliet attended the company dinner, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The hands of the clock crawled slowly, and every second felt like torture. I told myself that it was just a normal business function, nothing to worry about. But deep inside, a faint voice kept reminding me that it wasn't that simple. It was 2 in the morning when I finally heard the sound of the key turning. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. Juliet entered the room softly, and I could smell her faint perfume. It wasn't her usual scent. I heard the sound of water in the bathroom, then the hum of the hairdryer. When she finally climbed into bed, I could barely contain myself to question her. But I held back, because I was afraid of the answer I was going to hear. Over the next few days, I began to notice something more unusual. Juliet's cell phone was always on silent and never left her side. A few times I walked into the room and saw her lock the screen quickly. She started traveling more frequently and always alone. Whenever I offered to stay with her, she would refuse for any reason. What disturbed me the most was that she began to mention her new boss, Max Thompson, frequently. Max thinks we should try a new marketing strategy. Max says my idea is promising. Max invited me to an industry summit next month. Max, the name is like a sharp knife, stabbing my heart again and again. I was working in my study one evening when Juliet suddenly pushed her way in. "Honey," she said, with a hint of nervousness in her voice, "I'm going to New York for a week next month on business." I looked up and tried to stay calm. "Oh, what's the program?" She said vaguely, "A new client. Might be busy." I nodded, pretending to focus on the computer screen. But my mind is racing. A week? Why so long? Is Max going to be there too? I finally couldn't resist asking. Juliet stiffened for a moment, then smiled and said, "Of course, he's the head of the program. What's the matter? Are you jealous?" Her tone was relaxed, like she was joking, but I saw her fingers unconsciously twisted together, a habitual gesture when she was nervous. I forced myself to smile. "No, just curious. Have a nice trip." Juliet let out a sigh of relief and hurried out of the den. I sat there, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Instinct told me that things were much worse than I thought. That night, I made a decision. I knew it was wrong, but I had to get to the bottom of it. While Juliet was in the shower, I checked her cell phone. Most of the messages had been deleted, leaving only a few inconsequential conversations. But in a conversation with Max, I found a suspicious message: "Don't forget to delete the hotel reservation confirmation email." My heart sank. This wasn't a coincidence. This was premeditation. My hands were shaking and I almost dropped my phone on the floor. Just then, I heard the bathroom door open. I quickly put my phone back down and pretended to be organizing my desk. Juliet walked in, wrapped in her bathrobe, her hair still dripping. "Are you still up?" she asked. I steeled myself right away. She came over to me and gave me a soft kiss on the cheek. I could smell the scent of her body wash, so familiar, yet so foreign. In this moment, I felt an intense pain that someone I loved, someone I trusted, might be cheating on me. That night, I lay in bed, listening to Juliet's steady breathing, but feeling more alone than ever. I didn't know what to believe or what to do. All I knew was that our marriage was standing on the edge of a cliff, and I had to do something to save it or end it. Tomorrow, I resolved, tomorrow I would find out the truth. Whatever the outcome, I must face it, because living with doubt and lies is more painful than knowing the truth. Outside the window, the Boston night was fading and dawn was coming, and my world, too, was about to reach a turning point. That weekend, Juliet said she had to work late at the office. I nodded my head in agreement, but in my mind, I was calculating how to verify my suspicions. When she left, I sat in my study and stared at her laptop. I knew the password, but all along, we had respected each other's privacy. Now, however, the line had become blurred. Taking a deep breath, I turned on the computer. My fingers trembled as I entered my password. The screen lit up and my heart raced. I don't know if I'm really ready to face the truth. The first thing that caught my eye was her email. Most of it was work-related, but one folder caught my eye. It was named Personal. I clicked on it, and there were only a few emails, all from Max. The first email was titled New York Schedule. My hand hovered over the mouse and I hesitated for a while before clicking on it. Inside was a detailed list of their New York itinerary, including reservations at a fine restaurant and a double room in a luxury hotel. I felt a wave of vertigo and had to close my eyes and take a deep breath. When I opened my eyes again, the words were still clear on the screen, as if mocking my naivety. The next few emails were even more heartbreaking. Intimate terms of endearment, ambiguous words, and some explicit innuendo. My Juliet, my wife, the mother of my children, became a different person in these emails. The last email completely broke me. It was a picture of Juliet and Max together, and they were kissing. The background was an office I wasn't familiar with, and it looked like it had been taken surreptitiously while working late. Juliet was smiling so happily in the photo, so relaxed. It was an expression I hadn't seen on her face in a long time. I shut down my computer and slumped into my chair. The room was suddenly terribly quiet, with only the sound of my rapid breathing. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been minutes or hours. My mind went blank, yet it seemed like a million thoughts were violently colliding. Suddenly, Emma's voice brought me back to reality. "Daddy, are you okay?" I looked up and saw my daughter standing in the doorway with worry written all over her face. I then realized my face was covered in tears. "I'm fine, baby." I try to squeeze out a smile, but Emma is clearly not convinced. She came over and hugged me gently. "It's Mom, right?" she asked softly. I looked at her in surprise. When did my little girl become so perceptive? I wanted to deny it, to protect her, but I realized I couldn't. I just nodded, and once again, tears fell. Emma didn't say anything, just hugged me tightly. In that moment, I felt both heartbroken and touched. Heartbroken because my marriage might be over, and touched because I had such understanding children. "Does Noah know?" I finally asked. Emma shook her head. "He's too young to understand that." I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. "Emma, listen," I said. "No matter what happens, Mommy and I love you guys. It's not your fault, understand?" Emma nodded, tears in her eyes. I knew she was trying to appear strong, and it made my heart wrench again. Just then I heard the door open. Juliet was back. I stood up and straightened my clothes. "Go see your brother, okay?" I said to Emma. She nodded knowingly and kissed me gently on the cheek before leaving the den. I take a deep breath and walk to the living room. Juliet is taking off her coat and smiles when she sees me. "Hey, I'm back." Things at the company are more complicated than expected. Her voice came to an abrupt halt. Maybe it was my expression that betrayed me, or maybe it was the tension in the air. Juliet's smile faded, replaced by a wary look. "What's wrong, Knox?" she asked cautiously. I look into her eyes, the eyes I once loved so much, but now they are filled with fear and guilt. I didn't need to ask anything more. Her reaction told me everything. "The New York trip," I said calmly. "Max will be there, right?" Juliet's face instantly turned pale. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but in the end, only a weak yes came out. I closed my eyes and felt the pain that came with the word. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself surprisingly calm. "We need to talk, Juliet," I said, "about our marriage, about Max, about everything." Juliet nodded slowly as tears began to well up in her eyes. I knew that from this moment on, our lives would never be the same again. And I, for one, had to make some hard decisions for myself and for my children. Outside the window, the night is drawing in. In our living room, a difficult conversation about betrayal, forgiveness, and the future was about to begin. That conversation lasted late into the night. Juliet cried, and so did I. She admitted everything. She admitted everything, from the initial ambiguity to the later deeper involvement. I listened to her explanation, but there was only one question in my mind. Why? Why was our 18-year marriage, the family we built together, betrayed so easily? When Juliet went to bed, I sat alone on the swing in the backyard, letting the cold wind blow in the early hours of the morning. I thought of the countless nights we'd laughed here as a family, and now I was left alone with a sky full of stars for company. The next morning, I told the kids I needed to get some air. Emma looked at me worriedly, and I did my best to give her a reassuring smile. Walking out of the house, I wandered aimlessly through the streets and eventually found myself in the city park. I sat on a bench and watched the morning runners, the old men walking their dogs, and the children playing. Life goes on, and I feel like I'm stuck somewhere in time and space, unable to move forward. Just as I was lost in my own thoughts, a familiar voice brought me back to reality. "Knox?" I looked up and saw my longtime friend Mike standing in front of me with 2 cups of coffee in his hand. He hands me a cup and sits down next to me. "Dude, you look like shit," Mike said bluntly. I smiled bitterly, not knowing where to begin. Mike and I were college roommates and have kept in touch over the years. He knows me, and he knows Juliet. Juliet, she I stammered for half a second and finally managed to get out only 3 words: cheated. Mike sucked in a cold breath, then gently tapped me on the shoulder. "I'm sorry, bro," he said. "Need me to beat the shit out of that asshole?" I shook my head, feeling a sudden wave of exhaustion. "No, I don't know what to do." Mike was silent for a moment, then said, "I know a good divorce lawyer. If you need one." Divorce. The word pierced my heart like a sharp knife. Even though I already knew the truth, it still terrified me to actually consider ending the marriage. "I don't know, Mike," I said. "What about the kids? What about our house? Our lives?" Mike sighed. "I know it's hard, Knox, but you need to look out for yourself. You can't keep living a life of lies and betrayal." I knew he was right, but it was still too painful to accept. We talked a little more and Mike gave me the lawyer's business card. I put it in my wallet, feeling its weight like it was on my heart. On the way home, I passed a bookstore. In the window was a book, How to Recover from Marital Betrayal. I stared at the book for a while, but finally walked in. As I stood at the cash register with that book in hand, a thought suddenly flashed through my mind. Of Max's wife. Did she know about this? Was she living in an uninformed bubble of happiness, like I was? I pulled out my cell phone and hesitated for a long time. I didn't know Max's wife Olivia very well, having only met her at a couple of company parties and merely leaving contact information. But at the moment, I felt like she might be the only person in the world who understood how I felt. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number. After a few rings, a soft female voice came through. "Hello, this is Olivia." My throat suddenly became dry, and I didn't know how to speak. Finally, I just said, "Olivia, I'm Knox, Juliet's husband. Can we meet?" There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. Then Olivia said, "Okay, Knox, I think we do need to talk." Hanging up the phone, I felt a wave of relief, tinged with a little nervousness. I didn't know what this meeting would bring, but I knew that I was taking proactive action rather than passively accepting the status quo. Walking out of the bookstore, the sun shone warmly on my face. I took a deep breath and felt the depression in my chest ease a little. I knew the road ahead was still long and difficult, but at least I was no longer groping alone in the dark. On the way home, I started thinking about how I was going to explain all of this to Emma and Noah. My heart was pumping from the hurt I was about to cause them, but I also knew that honesty was the best gift I could give them. No matter how this turns out, I'm going to make sure they know that it wasn't their fault and that both Juliet and I will always love them. Pushing open the door to my home, I was ready to face whatever came my way. No matter what the future holds, I know I have to be strong for myself and for my children. Because even in the darkest of moments, life always gives us a ray of hope, and I, for one, am trying to hold on to it. I chose a quiet cafe to meet Olivia. As I pushed open the door, I recognized her immediately, an elegant blonde woman staring intently at the cup of coffee in her hand. She looked up and our eyes met, each seeing the pain and doubt in the other's eyes. "Knox," she says softly, gesturing for me to sit down. I nodded and took a seat across from her. For a moment, neither of us knew what to say. Finally, I took a deep breath and spoke. "Olivia, I don't know how to start, but I thought you should know." She held up her hand and interrupted. "I know, Knox. I already know about Max and Juliet." I froze, not knowing how to respond. Olivia smiled bitterly and continued. "I've actually had my suspicions for a long time. Max's behavior has been so erratic lately. But it wasn't until last week that I was really sure." "How did you?" I had just opened my mouth when I realized how stupid the question was. Olivia shrugged. "The usual story. Suspicious text messages on your cell phone, strange purchases on your credit card bill. You know the drill." I nodded, feeling a sudden wave of exhaustion. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't really know what to say." "Don't apologize, Knox. It's not your fault, and it's not my fault." Olivia's voice is firm, but I can hear the tremor in it. We were silent for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Olivia asked softly, "What are you going to do?" It's a question I've asked myself countless times, but I still don't have an answer. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Do you?" Olivia took a deep breath. I think I'll get a divorce. I don't think I can trust Max anymore. Hearing the word divorce gave me heart palpitations, but at the same time, I felt a strange sense of relief. But at the same time, I felt a strange sense of relief, and Olivia's determination seemed to give me some strength. What about the kids? I asked, thinking of Emma and Noah in my mind. Olivia's eyes softened. That's the hardest part. My daughter Sophia is 12, and I don't know how to explain it all to her. I thought of Emma's mature eyes and Noah's innocent smile. We owe the kids an honest explanation, I said, even if it hurts them. Olivia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. You're right. They deserve to know the truth. Just then, my cell phone vibrated. It was a text from Juliet, asking when I was coming home. I stared at the screen, suddenly feeling a wave of bewilderment. Olivia noticed the change in my expression. Is it Juliet? She asked softly. I nodded, not knowing how to respond. Olivia reached out and gently covered my hand. Knox, listen. I know it's hard, but we have to be strong. For ourselves and for our children. Her touch brought an unexpected comfort. I looked up at her and saw in those blue eyes the same pain I felt, but also determination and strength. You're right, I said, feeling my voice a little firmer. We can't just get crushed. We chatted a little longer, exchanging some legal and financial information. As we were getting ready to leave, Olivia suddenly said, Knox, we should keep in touch. I think we might need each other's support. I nodded and felt a warmth spread through my heart. I feel the same way, Olivia. Thank you. Walking out of the cafe, the sunlight stung a little. I squinted my eyes at the people coming and going on the street. How many of them were going through similar pain? How many are trying to rebuild their lives? I took a deep breath and pulled out my cell phone. It was time to face reality. I sent Juliet a message. We need to talk. I'll be home soon. Then I texted Emma again. Honey, can we talk alone tonight? Putting my cell phone down, I felt a strange sense of calm. I knew there was a long, hard road ahead, but at least I wasn't alone anymore. On the walk to the subway station, Olivia's determined eyes came to mind. We've all been betrayed. We've all struggled with the pain, but we chose to stand up for ourselves and our children. That thought gave me strength. I know that I will be able to face whatever comes next, because now I am here, not only for myself, but also for those who depend on me. The subway pulls into the platform and I take a deep breath and step into the car. On the way home, I began organizing words in my head, thinking about how I would talk to Juliet and how I would explain it all to Emma and to Noah. It would be a difficult conversation, but I knew that it was a necessary step towards a new life. The train sped on, the view out the window blurring into a blur. I closed my eyes and felt the emotions welling up inside me. Sadness, anger, fear, but also hope and determination. I knew that from this day on, my life would never be the same. But I was ready for anything that might happen, because I finally realized that true strength comes not from escaping or retaliating, but from facing reality head-on and rediscovering myself in the face of adversity. The moment I pushed open the door to my home, I felt like I was walking into a strange world. Juliet was sitting on the couch in the living room, a glass of red wine in her hand, her eyes red and swollen. She looked up at me with a mixture of fear and anticipation in her eyes. "You're back," she whispered, her voice a little hoarse. I nodded and sat down across from her. For a while, neither of us knew what to say. Finally, I took a deep breath and spoke. "Juliet, we both know things can't go on like this." She lowered her head, tears slipping down her face. "I'm so sorry, Knox, that I really am. I don't know how things got to this point." I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. "Why, Juliet?" I asked. "Is our marriage so worthless to you?" Juliet shook her head and said excitedly, "No, that's not it. I don't know, Max. He makes me feel. I feel young again, energized. But I know that's no excuse. I screwed up everything and I know it. I look at this woman I once loved and suddenly feel a pang of strangeness. You know," I said calmly, "I saw Olivia today." Juliet jerked her head up, a flash of panic in her eyes. "Olivia? Max's wife?" I nodded. "Yes. She knows too." Juliet sat paralyzed on the couch, her face pale. God, she muttered, I'm such a terrible person. I didn't deny it or comfort her. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye and said, Juliet, we need to think about what to do next. For the sake of the kids and for our own sake. She nodded, tears welling up once again. Do you want a divorce? She asked in a small voice. The question pierced my heart once again like a sharp blade, but I had made up my mind to be honest about it. I guess so, I said. I don't think I can trust you anymore, Juliet. She didn't argue, just cried silently. I felt a strange sense of relief, as if the boulder that had been weighing on my chest had finally been removed. Just then I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. Emma was standing at the top of the stairs with worry in her eyes. Dad? Mom? What happened? Juliet and I exchanged a look before I stood up and walked over to Emma. Honey, I whispered, we need to talk. Can you ask Noah to come down with us? Emma nodded, a glint of realization in her eyes. A few minutes later, the four of us were sitting in the living room. Noah looked confused while Emma looked unusually calm. I took a deep breath and began to explain, Kids, your mom and I have something to tell you. We've decided to take some time apart. Noah immediately bursts into tears while Emma clutches her brother's hand. Juliet starts sobbing as well, and I try to keep my composure. It's not your fault, I continued. Sometimes complicated things happen between adults, but no matter what happens, we love you all. That will never change. The next few hours were one of the toughest moments I've ever experienced. We answered the children's questions and comforted them as best we could. Emma acted with exceptional maturity, while Noah took a little longer to make sense of it all. I felt exhausted when the kids finally made it back upstairs. Juliet looked at me with apologies and sadness in her eyes. What do we do next? She asked softly. I stood up and felt a strange calmness. I'll contact a lawyer, I said. We need to handle this in a civilized and peaceful manner, for the sake of the children. Juliet nodded, tears falling once again. I'm really sorry, Knox, she said. I hope one day you can forgive me. I looked at her and felt a complex of emotions welling up in my heart. Anger, sadness, disappointment, but also a hint of relief. Maybe someday, I said, but not now. That night, I lay on the bed in the guest room, my thoughts racing. I thought about my conversation with Olivia, the kids' reactions, and the remorse in Juliet's eyes. I knew that there was a long, hard road ahead, but I also knew that I had already taken the hardest step. I pulled out my cell phone and sent Olivia a message. I told Juliet and the kids. It was hard, but I think it was the right decision. I hope you're well too. A few minutes later, she replied, You're doing a brave thing, Knox. We'll get through this. Feel free to contact me if you need to talk. I looked at the message and felt a twinge of warmth spread through my heart. Yes, we will get through this. Because now I know that I'm not alone. I have my kids, my friends, and even an unexpected ally in Olivia. Turning off the light, I close my eyes. Tomorrow will be a new beginning, full of challenges, but also full of possibilities. I am ready to face whatever may come my way, because I know that true strength comes from facing difficulties head-on, not running away from them. Outside the window, moonlight spills onto the streets of Boston. My world may have turned upside down, but life goes on. And I, too, will keep going, because I know that on the other side of the storm, there could be new hope waiting for me. The divorce proceedings went much smoother than I thought they would. Maybe because Juliet felt guilty, or maybe because we both wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. The real challenge, however, was in everyday life. I moved into an apartment on the other side of town, not far from the kids' school. Dropping them off at school every morning and picking them up at night became the backbone of my new life. Emma adapted quickly, but Noah still asks from time to time why Mom doesn't live with us. The other night, as I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Emma walked in. Daddy, she whispered, are you okay? I turned around and saw my little girl looking at me with eyes that were mature beyond her years. I put down the knife in my hand and walked over to her and hugged her gently. I'm fine, honey, I said. Don't worry about me. Emma shook her head. But I can tell you're upset. I took a deep breath and knelt down to look her flat in the eyes. Yes, I do get sad sometimes. But that's normal. It's important that we learn to accept it and move on. Emma nodded, then suddenly asked, Dad, have you ever thought? Maybe you could find someone new to keep you company? I froze, not knowing how to respond. Just then, my cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Olivia, asking if I was free to meet over the weekend to discuss some legal documents. Looking at the screen of my phone, it dawned on me that Olivia had become an integral part of my life over the past few months. We communicate regularly, support each other, and share our respective progress and frustrations. Maybe, Emma, I finally said, but what matters right now is you and Noah. Emma gave a knowing smile, which made me a little uneasy. When did my daughter become so perceptive? The weekend was fast approaching. I had a date with Olivia at a quiet cafe. When I walked in, I saw that she was sitting at a table in the corner, sunlight pouring through the window on her blonde hair. Hi, Knox, she smiled. How's it going? I sat down and couldn't help but smile back. Luckily, I said, the kids are adjusting better than I thought they would. How about you? Olivia sighed. Sophia's still a little upset, but she's starting to understand. Max? He's been trying to salvage it, but I think I've made up my mind. We talked about legal documents for a while, and then the conversation unconsciously turned to other things. We talked about work, about our children, about our respective interests. Before I knew it, several hours had passed. When we were finally ready to leave, I suddenly realized that this was the first time in a long time that I had felt so relaxed and happy. Knox, Olivia said as we walked out of the cafe. I'm glad we have each other to talk to. I looked into her eyes and felt a sudden rush of heartbeat. I do too, Olivia, I said. You have no idea what this means to me. Just then, my cell phone rang. It was Juliet that I hesitated but picked it up. Knox, Juliet's voice sounded nervous. Can I stay with the kids one more day? I want to spend more time with them. I glanced at Olivia, who was looking at me with understanding eyes. I took a deep breath and said, Okay, Juliet, no problem. After hanging up the phone, Olivia gently touched my arm. You're doing great, Knox, she said. You're a good father. I felt a wave of warmth rush through my body. Thank you, Olivia, I said, for everything. We were standing in the street with the sun pouring down on us. I suddenly realized that despite everything, life still has the potential to be good. Do you want to go for a walk in the park? I blurted out, It's such a nice day. Olivia smiles and nods. I'd love to. As we walked side by side on the park path, I felt something inside me slowly healing. I know there is a long road ahead and many more challenges. But right now, on this sunny afternoon with Olivia, I feel hope for the first time. Maybe Emma's right. Maybe I am indeed ready to start a new life. But either way, I know I'm not alone anymore. I have my kids, I have my friends, I have Olivia, and that's enough. On the way home, I texted Emma, Honey, I think I found someone who can make me happy. Thanks for the advice. Emma quickly replied, That's great, Dad. She must be a special person. I couldn't help but smile as I looked at the message. Yes, Olivia is indeed a special person. And I, perhaps, was finally ready for a fresh start. Over time, my relationship with Olivia deepened. We began to see each other more frequently, not just to discuss legal documents or share divorce worries, but because we enjoyed each other's company. However, this new relationship also brought unexpected challenges. One night I was getting ready to take Emma and Noah to the movies. Just as we were about to leave the house, Emma suddenly asked, Daddy, can we invite Olivia to go with us? I froze, unsure of how to respond. Noah looked a little confused, but Emma's eyes twinkled with anticipation. Ah. I hesitated. Maybe another time, honey. Just the three of us today, okay? Emma nodded, but I could tell she was a little disappointed. Later that night, after the movie was over and we were on our way home, Emma suddenly said, Don't worry, Daddy. We're going to like Olivia. I took a deep breath, feeling both touched and a little uneasy. Thank you, dear. But these things are complicated and we need to take our time. Emma nodded thoughtfully while Noah focused on his console and didn't seem to notice our conversation. The next day, I got a call from Juliet. Her voice sounded a little nervous. Knox, can we talk? About Olivia. I felt a pang of unease. Sure, I said, "What's wrong?" Juliet was silent for a moment, then said, "The kids told me you were with her a lot. I just, I don't know what to think." I closed my eyes and felt a headache. "Juliet," I said slowly, "I know this may be hard for you, but we're divorced and I have the right to pursue my own happiness." "I know," Juliet's voice sounded a little choked. "I just wish you'd consider the kids' feelings." I felt a surge of anger come over me. "Like you consider their feelings when you decide to cheat?" I blurted out and immediately regretted it. There was silence on the other end of the line. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. "I'm sorry," I said. "That wasn't the right thing to say. But Juliet, you have to understand that I need to move on too." Juliet said softly, "I know. It's going to take some time to get used to it." After hanging up the phone, I felt both exhausted and confused. I picked up my phone and sent Olivia a message. "Can we talk?" Half an hour later, we were walking in the park. I told Olivia about my conversation with Juliet. She listened and gently held my hand. "Knox," she said gently, "we both know this isn't going to be easy. Maybe we should slow down and give everyone some time to adjust." I looked into her eyes and felt a surge of gratitude flood through me. "You're right," I said. "I just don't want to lose you." Olivia smiled and said, "You won't lose me. We just need to be a little more careful for the sake of the kids." That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights and thinking about how to find balance in my new life. I thought about Emma's anticipation, Noah's confusion, Juliet's unease, and Olivia's understanding. I knew there was a long road ahead and many challenges waiting for me. Just then, my cell phone rang. It was a message from Emma. "Dad, I'm sorry if I've made this difficult for you. I just want you to be happy." I looked at the message and my eyes moistened. When did my little girl become so understanding? I replied, "Thank you, honey. You will always be the most important person to me. I promise everything will be okay." Putting my phone down, I let out a deep breath. Yes, everything is going to be okay. It will take time, patience, and understanding. But I know that as long as we care about each other and support each other, we can get through this tough time. A strange peace welled up in me as I stared at the distant horizon. Life had given me a second chance, even though it came so unexpectedly. I decided to make the most of it, not only for myself, but for those I loved. Tomorrow, I thought maybe I'd invite Olivia and her daughter Sophia along for a picnic. Slowly, one step at a time. Because after all I've been through, I've learned the most important lesson of all. Life isn't a race. It's a journey that needs to be taken to heart. By the time spring rolled around, I felt like life was finally starting to get back on track, with Emma and Noah settling into their new living arrangements, and my relationship with Juliet easing up a bit. But most of all, I felt comforted by the growing understanding and trust between Olivia and me. That weekend, we decided to take the kids on a picnic in the countryside. It was the first time both of our families had ever taken a trip together, and I have to admit, I was a little nervous. "Dad, are we there yet?" Noah asked impatiently from the back seat. I smiled. "Almost there, man. Just hold on a little longer." Emma turned to Sophia, Olivia's daughter, and whispered, "You'll love this place. The scenery is especially beautiful." Sophia smiles shyly and nods. I saw Olivia smiling back in the rearview mirror and felt a sudden warmth in my heart. We spread out our picnic mats in an open meadow. The kids immediately ran off to play frisbee, leaving Olivia and I to organize the food in the shade. "What do you think?" I asked Olivia softly. "It's not too fast, is it?" Olivia looks over at the children who are playing, then turns to me with a gentle glint in her eye. "I think it's just right, Knox. Look at them. How happy they are." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. Yes, the kids do seem to be having fun. Even Sophia, who is usually quiet, is laughing and chasing a frisbee with Emma at the moment. At lunch, we sat around, sharing sandwiches and fruits, Noah excitedly recounting funny stories from school, and Emma and Sophia whispering about some new movie that had come out. Watching this scene, I suddenly realized that this was what I had been looking for. A big, harmonious family. "Hey, Dad," Emma called out suddenly. "Can we come out like this more often? It's really fun." I glanced at Olivia and she nodded at me. "Sure, honey," I said, "as long as everyone likes it." In the late afternoon, Olivia and I sat on a blanket and chatted while the kids played a short distance away. You know, Olivia said softly, I never thought I could be this happy again. After Max, I thought it was all over. I took her hand in mine. Me too. But now I realize that endings can be new beginnings. Olivia leaned on my shoulder and we just sat quietly, watching the kids play and enjoying the sunshine and the breeze. On the way back, the car was quiet. Noah and Sophia were both asleep and Emma was listening to music with her headphones on. I stole a glance at Olivia and realized she was looking at me too. We looked at each other and smiled, both feeling an unspeakable happiness. That night, after dropping off Olivia and Sophia, Emma came into my study. Dad, she said, I really enjoyed today. Olivia and Sophia were great. I smiled. I enjoyed today too. Do you think? Would you mind if we went out together like this more often in the future? Emma shook her head. Not at all. In fact, I think it's great. She paused, then asked, Daddy, you and Olivia, isn't that special? I took a deep breath and decided to be honest with my daughter. Yes, honey. Olivia is very special to me. But you and Noah will always be the most important people to me, understand? Emma nodded and gave me a big hug. I understand, Dad. I'm happy for you. Watching Emma's back as she left, I felt both touched and relieved. My little girl had grown so much in that time that I couldn't help but marvel at how time flies. Before I went to bed that night, I texted Olivia, Today was really great. Thank you for being such a big part of my life. Olivia quickly replied, I want to thank you too, Knox. You gave me the courage to believe in love again. Lying on my bed, I reflected on the day. From the initial pain and confusion to the peace and hope I now feel, this journey has not been easy. But I know that it is these experiences that have shaped the person I am now, that have taught me to cherish those around me, and that have given me the courage to open my heart again. Tomorrow, I think, I'm going to give Juliet a call and tell her about Olivia and me. It might be a little awkward, but I believe honesty is the key to sustaining all of our relationships. After all, we are both trying to create a loving environment for our children. Closing my eyes, I felt a peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. Yes, life is still full of challenges, but I am no longer afraid to face them. Because I know that no matter what happens, I have the strength to deal with it. And that strength comes from those who love me around me and from my rediscovered self. Time flies, and 2 years have gone by. Today was a special day. Olivia and I decided to throw a backyard barbecue party and invited everyone who was important to us, including Juliet and her new boyfriend. As I stood in front of the grill and looked out over the yard, Emma and Sophia were teaching Noah a new card game. Juliet and her boyfriend Tom were chatting with Olivia, and it seemed like the atmosphere was fairly congenial. Need any help, Dad? Emma asked as she walked over. I smiled. No, honey. I'll manage. Go have fun. Emma nods, but doesn't leave right away. She looked at the crowd in the yard, then turned to me. You know what, Dad? I'm so proud of you. I looked at her with some surprise. Why do you say that? Because you made all of us better. She said, even in the hardest times, you didn't give up. You taught us how to forgive and how to start over. I felt my eyes moisten and hugged Emma gently. Thank you, baby. You have no idea how much this means to me. Just then, Olivia walked over. Is everything okay? She asked gently. I nodded. Better than good. Later that night, when everyone was gathered, I decided to say a few words. I cleared my throat and everyone quieted down and looked at me. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming today. I began 2 years ago. I thought my world had fallen apart. But standing here now, I realized that it was just a new beginning. I looked at Juliet, and she gave me an understanding smile. Then I continued, I've learned that life is not about running from the storm, but learning to dance in the rain. We all make mistakes, but what matters is how we learn and grow from them. I turned to Olivia and took her hand. Olivia, thank you for giving me a second chance to believe in love. Then I looked to Emma and Noah. Boys, thank you for your understanding and support. You guys are my pride. Finally, I raised my glass. Let's toast to new beginnings, to forgiveness, to growth, to love. Everyone raised their glasses in celebration, and I felt warm and grateful inside. Later in the evening, after the guests had left, Olivia and I sat on the swing set in the backyard and watched the stars. You know, I whispered, I never thought life could be this good. Olivia leaned on my shoulder. Me too. We're really lucky, Knox. I nodded, remembering the past. From discovering Juliet's betrayal, to the painful divorce process, to meeting Olivia, learning to forgive, and believing in love again. It wasn't an easy journey, but it shaped the person I am now. We've got a long way to go, I said, but I'm looking forward to walking with you. Olivia looked up at me with stars in her eyes. Me too, Knox. Me too. We smiled at each other and then proceeded to sit quietly and enjoy the peaceful moment. I know that life won't always be this calm, but I've learned how to stay balanced in the storm. Because now I realize that true strength is not in avoiding all storms, but in learning how to dance through them. And with all these people around me who love me, I know that no matter what comes our way, we can face it together. This is my story, a story of betrayal, forgiveness, and rebirth. But more importantly, it is a story of hope. Because even in the darkest of moments, life always surprises us if we are willing to open our hearts. For that, I am eternally grateful. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.